Alrighty, welcome back in. We just talked about Steve Sarkisian signing a massive extension with Texas through the 2030. And now let's get into some spring ball. We have spring practice starting all over the place, except for at Georgia State, which is something we will get into throughout the week, I'm sure. But I broke down a couple of the teams that I think have the most to gain from spring practice, some teams that need some things to happen if they're going to be successful in 2024. And I think where we should start is in the SEC and in Lexington, Kentucky. There is a lot of change going on there. Liam Cohen has taken the job as the Bucs offensive coordinator after they lost Dave Canales to the Panthers, and Bush Hamdan has taken over, coming over from Boise State. Obviously, a super explosive offense a year ago. Ashton Jeanty was one of the best running backs in all of college football last year. So a lot to like with him, but you still have to get that rapport with the new faces in town. I talked about Brock Vandegrift being a hugely talented quarterback that just couldn't get a shot around, really good quarterback play from Stetson Bennett and really good quarterback play from Carson Beck, obviously, a year ago. Just never really got a fair shake necessarily while at Georgia. Now he's got a fresh start at Kentucky, and I can't wait to watch. I think his relationship with Bush Hamdan will be something to watch throughout the spring, and if they can get in lockstep and get this thing moving, Kentucky's definitely a team I would watch. Jamori Macklin is a wildly talented receiver they added. Barry Brown can fly. He might be faster than anyone else in the country. So tons to really like about this Kentucky team, but I do think it really comes down to, can you get the most out of Brock Vandegrift? Can you put him in the right positions and, bring out the best in him that we've seen in high school and in spring games and in limited time while at Georgia. But another team in the SEC that feels like the obvious team that has the most to gain from spring practice, and it's Alabama. Any team that loses Nick Saban immediately has to get to work, immediately has to be in lockstep going into spring practice, and Kalen DeBoer has dealt with just about everything he possibly could during his short time at Alabama, except for coaching football. So I'm sure he is very excited to get back on the field, actually be coaching the sport he loves instead of worrying about coaches leaving and players leaving and transfer portal and filling the shoes of the greatest of all time and all of this stuff that comes with the territory when you're at Alabama. But it's a huge offseason, obviously, for them. Had Ryan Grubb leave, so they got tons to figure out, really, more than anything else. They need to hire a really good O-line coach here pretty soon, because that is still obviously a glaring hole with Scott Huff heading up to Seattle to join Ryan Grubb with the Seahawks. And that will probably be the most telling part of this spring. Can they hire the right guy, the offensive line coach? And then throughout spring, watching just the demeanor of this team and see how they respond to the new coach. Obviously, when you lose someone like Nick Saban, no one's going to be quite like him. But it'll be interesting to see how they respond to him. And then when that second transfer portal window opens, it'll be very telling to see what this team's going to look like in 2024 and in the Kalen DeBoer era in a lot of ways. So something definitely to watch there. And then finally, one last SEC team, Missouri. Missouri's coming off an absolutely huge year. Elijah Drinkwitz has done an incredible job while there, and he added one of the best players in the country this past recruiting class in Williams Nowari, an edge rusher that is just incredible, an absolute specimen of a human. But I think one of the big areas that we could, be worried about a little bit with Missouri is that run game. You're losing Cody Schrader. They do have some young options, but someone's going to have to step up into that role. It's possible that after spring ball they go out and try to get a running back because they don't love the options in-house. But as of right now, things are rolling. They got Brady Cook. They got Luther Burden coming back next year. So everything is coming up Missouri. I tend to believe they're a top 10 team in the country, but everything comes down to what happens on Saturdays in fall, right? So Missouri has, tons to be excited about, tons to be optimistic about, but this spring is going to tell a lot in terms of was 2023, uh, shock in the pan? Was it something that cannot be replicated, or is Missouri building? And I tend to believe they're building, but we won't really know until we see these guys out in the field. So excited to see what the spring holds for them, and then going into 2024. And then we got we'll roll on over actually to the Big Ten. Michigan, maybe the most important team in the country, because losing Jim Harbaugh is huge. You're coming off a national title, obviously, but losing Jim Harbaugh, losing Jesse Minter, losing Jay Harbaugh, they have a ton of things they need to figure out very quickly. And Sharon Moore still has, hires to make. He still has tons of outside things before he can worry about football. But at the end of the day, he's got to get Alex Orji up to speed. All these guys have to be able to run an offense that, was been very, very successful in the last couple of years, especially last year. But J.J. McCarthy was the ultimate game manager in their system. He understood the system top to bottom, could make the throws when he absolutely needed to. And Alex Orji has, at least in limited time, shown to be a uber athletic, very good running threat. But the question is, can he make the passes that he's going to need to make? And this spring will show a lot of that. It's very possible that he even gets beat out by freshman Jaden Davis, but we'll see how all of that comes to fruition. And also, their portal is still open. Keon Saab has already hit the portal, a DB for them. So they got to keep as many of the defensive guys intact as possible, especially with the defensive coordinator leaving and so much change happening. Keeping guys like Will Johnson in the door is imperative for Michigan. So the spring will show a lot of what they're going to be going forward. And then we got USC, one of the teams coming over from the Pac-12 into the Big Ten. They're kind of in a weird position. To start the offseason, they had tons of guys leave. Obviously, Caleb Williams going to the draft, likely to be the number one overall pick. And then you had Malachi Nelson go out the door, which seemed like a little bit more of he wasn't going to play there, at least not soon, more than he just didn't like the atmosphere or didn't like Lincoln Riley or whatever. So I don't know if that hurts USC as much as people necessarily think. They had Jaden Maeva come over from UNLV to be their quarterback, so we'll see how that works. But also, the big story around USC is it seems like Lincoln Riley has kind of changed his tune in the way he's going to coach. It seems like he's going to be a little bit more hard-nosed, a little bit more intense with his guys, a little bit more demanding, and we'll see. I've yet to see that from Lincoln Riley, but he said they have to play more hard-nosed, and D'Anton Lee, the new defensive coordinator there, will be huge for that. So we'll see how that all develops. Another team in the Big Ten, Penn State, and a lot of this comes down to Drew Aller. Obviously, a uber-talented kid, but had a really tough year last year. They have two new coordinators coming in. Tom Allen on the defensive end used to be the Indiana head coach. Very, very smart, very good at scheming up defense. And then Andy Kotelnicki coming over from Kansas. Both those guys need to be huge for this team, period. I think one of the biggest things that Penn State has been missing in recent years is just those elite play callers, those elite coordinators around James Franklin, who I think is a really, really good head coach, but hasn't necessarily done the best job of putting the guys around him to make him successful. So this will be a huge year for him. Do these hires hit the way that I and a lot of Penn State fans think they will? But a lot to be determined there. Julian Fleming coming in. Can him and Drew Aller become the real wide receiver one and quarterback tandem that they need to be? But tons to still figure out. Let's roll on over, though, to the ACC. Georgia Tech, a team that is relatively under the radar. I think when you look at their schedule, it makes sense why they're under the radar. It is a gauntlet of a schedule that starts in Ireland against Florida State, who I will talk about in just a second here. But returning Haynes King is as huge of a return as anyone's gotten in the country, really. Led the ACC in passing touchdowns last year, was a huge help to them being as successful as they were. And with him coming back, Eric Singleton Jr., a uber-talented wide receiver that was a freshman All-American, tons to really like about this team, but it comes down to execution and seeing if they can build off what Brent Key has kind of started to create there down in Atlanta. So it'll be interesting to see how that all develops. I really like this Georgia Tech team, but that schedule is mean. So let's see if they can survive. And I said they'd be facing off against Florida State. That's another team that just needs this spring to be huge. And I think the biggest thing about this team that everyone's kind of talking about, but not, zeroing in on enough is they need to use last year. They need to use being left out of the playoff, being disrespected, being all of those things. Use it to your advantage to say, no one believes in you, no one respects you. Let's go out and prove them wrong, essentially. So I can't wait to see what this Florida State team has in store. A team in the same state as them, Miami, really needs that as well. Cam Ward is in a contract year for the NFL. He needs to improve his draft stock. He was going to go into the draft, decided to pull out. So it'll be hugely important for him this next year. And then Mario Cristobal is in a weird spot where there are a lot of Miami fans that aren't happy with the way the first 2 years have gone. And I think mainly because of that Georgia Tech game a year ago that was just mind-boggling in a lot of ways, the end of that game. But I think he's a very very capable coach. I think they are relatively on track with where I thought. They'll have a very good offensive line. And as long as Cam Ward can be Cam Ward, I think they can be very successful. But let's roll through the Big 12 here pretty quickly. First of all, Texas Tech, a team that has been building a lot of momentum. Joey McGuire is one of the most passionate and fun coaches to talk about in the entire college football space because the energy is absolutely infectious from this guy. So love him a lot. They got the only 5-star in this recruiting class in all of the Big 12, in Micah Hudson. No Texas and OU. It's someone's chance to step up, and why not the Red Raiders? Used to be, a premier program in a lot of ways in the Big 12. Have taken a little step back, but still plenty in the mix. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. Kansas State, a team that is literally just sitting there waiting for this new Big 12 because not 2 years ago they won the Big 12 championship. They were able to be atop the conference, and now with Texas and OU out the door, no reason to believe that you shouldn't be atop of the conference going into next year. And with probably the best coach in the conference, Kyle Whittingham would give him a run for his money, but Chris Kleinman, both incredible coaches, and Avery Johnson is absolutely electric, one of my favorite players in all of college football. So can't wait to see what they kind of start to build, and can they be the team to beat in the Big 12 going forward. And then Arizona, with Brett Brennan's tenure starting there, tons are happening around him, obviously, losing coaches, losing players to Washington that followed Jed Fish. But they got the two guys that, are the linchpins of this team, and Noah Fafita and Tatori McMillan. They're absolutely incredible. So can they keep that rolling going into the new conference? Can they get everyone on the same page, moving in the same direction, and become a team that, walks into the conference and possibly plays for a conference title the opening year? I could definitely see that in the cards for them. So it'll be interesting to see how all this develops. Spring practice is just starting, so we will have tons of updates throughout the practices, and then spring games, obviously, tons of reactions to those. But those are some teams that I'm watching very, very closely as we get into this. But we are going to take a short break, and when we get back, it is Good Vibes Monday, the very first edition of that. So stay tuned, and we will be right back.